Hi, everybody. You're watching Passion Project, and I'm your host, Kat Margulis. On today's show, we have Janice Zawerbny, executive editor at HarperCollins Canada. And I'm actually going to read Janice's bio because it's so mind-blowing. Janice has been an editor for more than 25 years in Canada. Most recently, she was the editor of Five Little Indians by Michelle Good, which was nominated for the Giller Prize and the Writers' Trust Fiction Prize, and won the Amazon First Novel Award, the Governor General's Award, and the Kobo Emerging Writer Prize. Before joining HarperCollins, Janice started a nonfiction imprint at Biblioasis called the Untold Lives series, which published Mark Bury's art book, Bushrunner, The Adventures of Pierre Esprit Radisson, and that won the Charles Taylor Prize for Creative Nonfiction in 2020. Janice was also the fiction editor at House of Anansi Press for 3 years, where she edited and acquired The Best Kind of People by Zoe Whittle, great book, which was a finalist for the Giller Prize, The Break by Katharina Vermette, which won the Amazon First Novel Award and was a finalist for numerous other awards. Welcome, Janice. It's an honor and a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm also, I know what else is not in my bio that I'm kind of proud of that I should mention, is that I'm also the co-founder of the Carol Shields Award for Fiction, which is the first transnational award for women writers in Canada and the US.
Yeah.
I do that in my spare time when I'm not editing.
Yes. Okay. I get to add that. I'm going to add that to the bio on the show notes page too. That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. And I mean, you kind of let me know some other books that you have worked on. And I was just like blown away by the caliber of the books and the writers and the writing that you work with. I got to see you at Humber College a couple of years ago, and you read people's first page and gave me feedback on mine. You said, cut it back by 2/3. And I did. And it was the best thing I ever did. It made such a difference. But I'm wondering, like, how do you get here? What does it take to be an editor at HarperCollins, working with the writers that you do?
Well, I've been an editor for a long time now. So more than, I don't know what my bio says, but more than 25 years now. So it's been a long time. But I knew I wanted to be an editor. I took editorial courses. I did the Centennial Publishing program while at the same time I was doing my undergraduate degree, and then I did a graduate degree. And I started working in publishing houses while I was still in university doing summer internships. And so that was really invaluable to me to learn the craft of editing and also author management, how to just learn how to deal with authors and people and creatives, but also, publishing is a business. So there's lots of business things that you also need to take into consideration. I think sometimes when you're a creative person, you're focusing on the creative side of things and you forget that there's a business that runs it, and there are things that you need to know about that as well to balance out your skills.
It's I had some ideas, some illusion of what an editor what an editor does in the business and the role in the whole publishing process, but I really had no clue. Like, can you tell me, like, what do you got? Like, what is the job description? It sounds like it's everything.
It's everything. We aren't just swanning around with pencils behind our ears, like reading manuscripts all day. Most of my editing and my reading is done weekends and evenings, because during the day, as an editor, there's so much administration. There's a lot of administration. There are days where you just feel like you're on email all day, where you're just answering correspondence. So you're talking to authors, obviously, but you have authors who you previously published or whose books have already come out. You've got your authors who have books coming out now, and then you've got your authors whose books are maybe coming out next year or the year after. So you've got these 3 levels of authors that you're dealing with whose projects are at different places. You're talking to agents. You're in an office, so you have editorial meetings, pub board meetings, production meetings, sales and marketing meetings, meetings about various things, foreign rights, So you're always meeting and talking to your colleagues, and there's great lots of administration, just basic things like catalog copy and jacket copy, and liaising with the production department about your book jacket, or the sales and marketing people need information, or you need to update that author's bio, or you're rewriting jacket copy or catalog copy, or
Wow. It doesn't feel like there's enough of you guys.
No,
There's
not. I think every editor feels that. Every editorial department. I mean, I think there needs to be about 5 more of us. But we all do like a lot of work, because at any given time, I'm working on probably about 10 to 12 projects at any given time. And again, like per year. So again, I have I'm managing, let's say, 10 projects that came out last year, plus 10 projects that are coming out now, and then another 10 that are coming out next year and the year after. So there's a lot of juggling of a lot of things, and everybody needs different things from you at different times, different deadlines.
So that's kind of helpful to know. So, an editor at a big publishing house like Harper is only taking on perhaps 10 books or authors a year.
Yeah, I take on 10. My goal is 12 a year. But I mean, that's just for one given year. Again, I'm acquiring into the future. So I might have, I also have another 12 lined up for next year, and another 12 lined up for the year after that. And you're always acquiring, into the future. So if I acquire a book today, that book won't come out for another 2 years, 18 months to 2 years, most likely 2 years. The amount of, you need about a year to do the editorial work, then you need about 6 months for production, and then you need about 6 months pre-pub for the book to be printed, have promotion and publicity in place, and then sort of hit the bookstores. So you're working very, very far into the future sometimes.
I didn't plan this question, but I feel like you're the best person for me to ask. Is that ever going to change, that lead time? The rest of the world is moving so quickly. I wonder, could it be that eventually this is going to get condensed into 6 months or 3 months? Could they ever
No, you can't, because putting a book together is a big, big undertaking, right?
Yeah.
And you need that year. You need at least a year to do the editorial back and forth. Most authors have day jobs or families and lives. They're not churning things around in 2 or 3 days, and editors are, again, juggling multiple projects. So there's only enough hours in the day for me to get through a manuscript and do things. And so you need it. So you need that year. The media is the media. The media needs at least 6 months to 8 months lead time, right? Review copies going out. If you want to review, you have to have that advanced reading copy into the hands of the media at least 6 months ahead of time, so someone has a chance to read it and then write the review and then publish the review. So there's a lot of moving parts in publishing. There's sales, there's marketing, there's publicity, there's production, there's art and design, and there's foreign rights departments. So there's just a lot of things going on all at once. And so none of it can happen quickly. If you want to do it well, it cannot happen quickly.
And is it you get this manuscript and you guys polish it off? Will you ever go through more than one draft with the writer, or is it only ever
No. Yeah. Never one draft. Oh my God, it would be a dream if everything was one draft. Are you kidding? Oh my God, that would be amazing if everything was one draft. Nothing's ever one draft. I don't think that's ever happened. Maybe once. I can think of one book that needed only one draft, and that was Siege 13 by Tomas Kubowski, which won the Writers' Trust Award for Best Fiction that year. And his stories, the collection of short stories, were so polished, and a lot of them had already been published in other places. So there was very little for me to do on them. But that is the exception and not the rule. So most of the time, I mean, I'd say on average, you're going through 3 drafts minimum. I've done 10 drafts. I've done 12 drafts. I've done 8 drafts. I've done 5 drafts. It depends on the project. It depends what the project needs, what kind of editorial intervention it needs. It depends how responsive the author is to your editorial input and to making the changes. Sometimes an author might take a draft and only make 50% of the changes. Like they're sort of focusing on one specific aspect, and then it comes back to you and they're like, okay, does this part look okay? Now I'm going to go back and do this other part that needs fixing. And so you can go back and forth with endless numbers of drafts. So it's never ever one draft. I would say to anyone who wants to be an author, embrace the revision process, because all publishing is about revision. All good writing is about revision. I find that the most veteran and seasoned authors really love the revision process. They understand that it makes the book better. I think rookie authors, a big mistake they often have is that they do think like, I'm just going to hand in this draft and you're somehow going to send it to the printer and we're going to magically have a book. And that's not what's going to happen. As much as I like a book, when I acquire it, it still needs work,
Yeah. Well, I had the total opposite story, which was that somebody will see the diamond in the rough and will work with me. Now, this was 5 years before I even self-edited. This was before I took any writing courses. I mean, I'm a journalist, so I have a little bit of a head start, but this was like, I was so proud of it when I first finished my first draft of the book, and I sent it out, and I just thought, I'm like, there's going to be work and somebody's going to be willing to do all that work with me. Yeah. But then 5 years later, I realized, no, it really gets to be a 10 before it goes out. Yeah.
I think there was a time, I don't know when, in the olden days, sometime, there was a time where, and I think actually a lot of indie publishers can still do this. I think larger corporate publishing houses like HarperCollins, probably less so. But when you're with a smaller indie press, you do have the luxury. You have the luxury of maybe buying a book based on an idea or a rough concept and working with an author to turn it into something. I have done that. I mean, most of my career up until HarperCollins, I joined HarperCollins in 2018. And but up until that point, it was, I could develop projects with authors. I could meet an author and go, that's a great idea, and let's sign it up and let's work and put it together. At HarperCollins, that's not the case. We need manuscripts that have achieved a certain level as just a certain level. And it sort of ensures to us that the author can actually execute the project in a way and to a level that we need it to be. And we don't have that luxury of sort of developing things from scratch. We just can't. There's too many projects going through, and we have too many books to work on. And I also think there's sometimes a misconception with some new authors that like an editor is somehow a writing instructor. And I'm not a writing instructor. I'm not there to teach you how to write. You need to come to me being able to write. I can tell you how to revise. I can give you advice and suggestions, and because all editing is suggestion, although there is concrete right and wrong. And I do know what will work better and what won't work. And I think the other thing an editor brings to that revision process is I have one eye on the market out there. The author doesn't. The author is in their world that they've created. But I have my eye on their project, and I've got my eye on the market, and I know what the market is and what the market wants and what the market needs, and at what level we need to sort of aspire to. So I think that's what an editor also sort of brings to the table and to a project, to a writer. I think it's really, really valuable, because I'm not saying that authors have to have, I mean, authors don't know the market. I mean, they're creatives, right? They're there to sort of create this thing, this object, this book, or the world within that book. So they're not thinking about the market. It's my job as the editor who works for a publisher to have my eye on the market.
Yeah. And like, how much are you willing to work? Like, you get a manuscript and like, great writing, blah, blah, blah. But how big does that but have to be where you're like, not at this time, or just like, I don't know.
So well, yeah, I mean, you have to, can the writer write? Is there a story here? Is there something here I can work with?
Uh-huh.
And if it's a really close call, I mean, most editors meet with the author ahead of time. Right? You know, the agent will arrange for for you to have a conversation with the author, and that's so. I mean, it's for a number of reasons. First of all, like just at a very basic level, do we get along? Do I like you? Do I think I can work with you? When you are working with an author, they are going to be in your life for a very long time. They're going to be in your life for minimum of 3 years. You're going to have, again, a year of like editorial work. You're going to have a year where the book goes through production and goes in the market. And then maybe a year after that where it becomes a paperback, or, you know, or they're working on their next project that you want to see. Like you're going to be spending a lot of time together. So do you at a very fundamental level get along?
Mm-hmm.
More importantly, is my vision of your project and what I think it can be, does it jibe with what your vision of your project is?
Mm-hmm.
And you need to be on the same page. You know, if an author says, you know, if I say to an author, this is what I think of your book, and this is what I think what needs to happen to make it like really good and take it to market, and the author says, no, I don't agree, then I have my answer. It's like, okay, that's great. You have a very different vision for your book. I'm not the right editor for you, or maybe I'm not we're not the right publishing house for you. And so, you know, they can go find someone else to work with who agrees with their vision. I mean, but I do think authors need to trust their editor too, right? And so I think that's part of like, do you get along with the person? But really important is, do you trust this person? Do you trust my opinion as an editor? Like I would never tell you something that's going to make your book worse.
Yeah.
But there are authors who are very rigid in their vision, and they have to sort of open themselves up to the fact that I'm actually bringing to the table some valuable information, right? To help make your book a success. So so there has to be sort of trust, and you have to have, you know, a rapport with each other, and you have to have a shared vision.
Yeah. How much do the sales, like, will a book cross your desk and you're like, I really love this book, but we can't sell it, or it's not going to make enough money?
Yeah.
Like, how much does that play into the factor?
It's a big factor. I mean, at a bigger publishing house, yes. At a big corporate publishing house, yes. Smaller indie presses can take chances in a way that bigger publishing houses can't. And there are times where you're just like, this is really great, but it's really niche and it's a really small audience, and the cost of putting a book together is really expensive. It probably costs about $100,000 for the company to put your book together. So it's not a small financial undertaking. That's that business side of things that authors aren't really aware of, right? The publisher is fronting this money for your book. Someone's paying for it. The publisher's paying for it, and they need to be able to recoup their costs. So if they don't think their costs are going to be recouped, there's no point in doing it. It's not a good investment for them.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's the kind of in the background, the business decisions that are going into, you know, whether you acquire a book or not.
And now, like, agents put out I always get my manuscript wish list, manuscript MSWL, right? They put out, they have their own flavors, they have their tastes. Is that the same with editors, where you're like, this is my wish list and stuff like that?
Well, so most editors have a mandate from the publisher that they work for. Like I acquire sort of across the board, but I'm one of the only editors at HarperCollins that publishes across the board. So I do literary fiction, literary nonfiction, commercial fiction, and commercial nonfiction. So that's kind of everything. That's kind of a catch-all. Whereas the other editors, like, one works exclusively on nonfiction, just general nonfiction. One works on practical nonfiction. One works on, you know, might work only on commercial fiction. So you have a mandate with your publisher. I mean, when you're hired, they tell you what they need. And a lot of the time, you're only working in a very narrow stream. So as for taste, I mean, As an editor, I mean, I'd say especially in fiction, it's all about taste. It's all about, I mean, you can't acquire for any other reason than taste, right? And so I mean, I guess, I mean, I think taste can sometimes be very unconscious. I mean, maybe ask me at the end of my career when you look at everything I work on and like see if there's like sort of a thread running through all of it. I mean, at the moment I'm in it, so I don't see really a thread. I mean, for me, is this book good or not? Do I like the writing? Is this an engaging story? Is it an original story? There's got to be something in there that I like. But most of all, the writing's got to be good. Like number one, the writing has to be good. The number one thing is always the writing.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you, but you're kind of touching on it already. Like, what can writers do, or what should they know when it comes to appealing to editors? Like, how can they build a case for themselves or make themselves more appealing?
I mean, I don't know that you have control over that. I mean, other than controlling the quality of your work and making sure that when you send out a manuscript, that it's the best manuscript it can be. Like, it can't be like sloppy or thrown together. And I think that's where an agent is important, because agents know how to craft a proposal. They know how to position a book. I mean, I think positioning is also really big. Like, where does your book fit in the bookstore? Ask yourself that question. There are authors who go, well, it fits in memoir and it fits in self-help, but I think it's also got a literary aspect to it. Figure out where if it's in one place. And if you're all over the place like that, then you're unfocused, and your manuscript's probably very unfocused too. So, and also know the market, like what's selling, I think a big question, and agents again help with this, like what else is out there that you can compare your book to, and don't say my book is not like anything else out there. That's not true. Your book is like something else out there, but what is it? Tell me what it is. And we call these comp copies and comp. And so I need to know like what a book is that's similar to yours. I just to position it in my head, but also for our sales and marketing and publicity department to position it in the market. We need to know what is it? What is your book? And that's a question that's very hard for authors to answer. I get that. I think that's why you need an agent. An agent is a great person to have to help position your writing. They're great first readers for you. They can help polish up your manuscript before it's seen by anybody. And I think agents are great because they know what editors might like your book. Like they actually know what the taste is of different editors. They can sort of say, oh, I know this is the kind of book that Janice at HarperCollins really like.
So there is that going into that.
Yeah, they know their colleagues in publishing, and so they know who they have who they can appeal to. And I think that's something, again, and an author wouldn't know that. So I think that's really important part of like the agent being part of that process of acquisition.
Yeah, how closely do editors and agents work together?
Well, we work together pretty closely. I mean, you just wait for them to send you stuff. I mean, and then if I don't hear from an agent for a long time, I might send out a little note saying, hi, remember me? You got anything? What's coming up? Do you
ever have those moments where there's like actually like you're not like completely drowning in submissions?
No, I do because I mean, there are times where things get really like summertime is a pretty dead time in publishing, and they're like, I think all the agents are on vacation or something, because I'm just like, I haven't seen anything all week. Like, where are you guys? Like, send me something, right? Or that an agent has just signed a certain author, and you're like, oh, I really like that author. I've seen something else from that author. I really like that work. And so I might like go, hey, I know you just signed that author. Like, I really like their work. Can I see it when it becomes available? So as an editor, yeah, we try to be, you try to be proactive too. But
that's very cool to hear. As a writer, you don't, that is just, that's fascinating.
Yeah, like, so I know who your agent is now. So, I could phone her next week and go, where's Kat's book? Can I take a look at that? You can certainly do that. I mean, you have to have a good relationship with the agents. I mean, they have authors that I want to sign, and they have authors that they want to sign. So we have a mutual business relationship here, right?
Yeah.
And it's important to, you have good relations with your agents out there.
Yeah.
And a good agent knows all the editors and what they like and what they don't like and what they acquire and what they don't acquire.
Yeah, that's very cool to know. I'm just at the beginning, but I've heard that like agent author partnerships they can go on, for career, right? Is it the same with editors? Will people generally stay with an editor, or is it like every book could potentially have a different editor?
Yeah, it depends. So what happens, sometimes you're a victim of your own success. So let's say, you publish someone when you're still at an indie press and the book has a lot of success, which has happened with my career. And so then what happens is one of the very big, deep-pocketed multinational publishers comes and steals your author away because they offer gobs and bags of money to the author. So they go, and you can't blame an author for following the money. I would never blame them for doing that. But you do lose authors sometimes because of that, because they get a huge offer from another company. And there's no way, like if I was with an indie press, that I could offer that kind of money that, say, a random Penguin could offer, right? So you sometimes lose authors because of that. I'd like to think I have really good relationships with all of my authors, and that's pretty much the only reason my authors have moved on, usually because they've had a better deal somewhere else. But you do stay with authors for years. I mean, that's the best kind of relationship, and the most successful kind of author-editor relationship you have is when you end up doing multiple books with an author. There's some authors I've done 3 or 4 or 5 books with, and that's, I'm really proud of that, because it's like you have a really good relationship and a rapport, and you understand what they want, and you understand their writing, and you understand what you do. You have this really great sort of mutual understanding of each other, and and you end up having success with them in that way. So it's great. So yeah, I mean, ideally,
will you travel with a writer if they try things that are different? Or
you have a conversation. I mean, it's not like they come out of like left field and all of a sudden, like if you have a good relationship with your author, like nothing should surprise you. They'd probably say to you in advance, I'm thinking of doing this thing, or I want to, like, maybe they've written fiction their whole life and they're like, I want to write a nonfiction memoir about something. What do you think? And you can talk it out ahead of time, and you can kind of go, I mean, you also have to, you're mapping out a person's career here, right? Is this the best time to be doing this kind of book? Is this the time? Is there really a story there? You would talk about it ahead of time. I think if it's someone you've worked with many times, it's with the authors I've worked on multiple books, we're often working on one book and already talking about what the next book will be, right? And sometimes you're just throwing around ideas. Like you could throw around ideas for a year. It's like, well, what about this? Or what about that? What about this? What about that? And if you have a good relationship, you talk it out and you come to figure out what's best for the author. And what the next best move is for the career, and also like what's going on in the market. Like if they said, I really want my next book to be, science fiction, you might go, like right now science fiction sales are down. Like maybe that's not the best book, right now. Or I want to write a thriller, and it's like, well, maybe this is not the best time to write a thriller. Or maybe it's like, that would be great because thrillers are like, everybody's reading thrillers right now. Maybe that's the next perfect book for you. So it's an ongoing discussion, but you help. I think, again, if you have a good and trusting relationship with your author, you can discuss these things, and you can, and along with the agent as well. Sometimes the agent's involved in this conversation as well. But you're trying to sort of craft a career, and you want the most success for your author.
So you like it, you like the author, you like the manuscript. What else happens in order to acquire the book and work with the author? Like, who else do you need to convince, or is it a choice that you feel strongly and passionate about? Like, I'm just curious about the whole book acquisition process.
So at indie presses, it's much simpler. It's, I like this, you go to the publisher, and again, if you have a good relationship with your publisher, they go, okay, like I'll give you the money and like off you go. At a bigger publishing house, it is not just me and what I want. You usually have a multi-layered sort of acquisition process. So like it comes to me, the agent sends me something, I read it, I like it. I then take it to an editorial meeting, which is just a meeting with the other editors. I discuss what I have. This is what I have. This is what it is. This is who wrote it. This is why I like it. This is what it is. They might ask me questions. And then if they think, I mean, they'll also sort of play devil's advocate and say, this is like not going to work, or there's another person who's coming out with a book next season on that same topic, let's say, like it's really good to get that kind of feedback from the group. But you go there and you talk about why you like it and why you think it's a valuable project and why you think it should be brought forward or acquired. Then it goes to a pub board. So a pub board is an even bigger meeting that involves, so not just the editor, the editors are there too, but it's also sales, marketing, publicity. And you're, again, it's the same sort of presentation. You're presenting this idea to them, but they're now looking at it even more broadly, like in terms of the larger market and how that book might fit in. And they have their own questions. Again, they'll say, well, those kinds of books aren't selling these days, or I don't know who the audience is for this book, right? Or that author has put out 5 books and they've all sold 200 copies a piece. Like it's just not, they don't have the audience yet. Or what's the author's platform? Do they have a following already? Or, I mean, it could be, again, depends on the project. They could ask you tons of different questions. But again, it's a very collegial group discussion about the book. And as the editor, my job is to bring my enthusiasm and my own editorial knowledge of writing and the project. And I hope to convince them that, this is a really good book and I really want to work on it. And then if so,
you get what you want. Like, how do you get shot down?
Oh yeah,
Or do editors get shot down?
We're shot down all the time.
God bless me.
So authors are not the only ones who are rejected. Editors are too. There's lots of projects that I've wanted to acquire, and they haven't been acquired for, again, a whole variety of reasons. And then, I'm disappointed and I have to go back and say to the agent or the author, like, sorry, I can't, I can't make an offer on this. And they'll usually ask why. And you're honest with them. It's like, well, because of this, or we discussed it in-house and this is why this is just not going to work for us. And, and it's disappointing sometimes. But, it's part of publishing. So it's just, then you just find something new.
Yeah. Oh my God. That is fascinating.
Yeah.
It's scary.
Very scary. Yeah. It's
Thank God you guys are doing that and not us authors, because I would not be able to do that.
Oh yeah. It's hard, especially if you really, really want something and you like, you do like read proposals and projects or manuscripts and you're like, but I love this. And they'll come and they'll go, this is why this isn't going to work. And you're like, but I want it. And they're just like, nope, can't have it. Got to pass on that one. So yeah, so it can be really disappointing. So yeah, as editors, like we face rejection too.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Good to know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So is there anything else that you think would be helpful for writers to know as they, step into the querying and submission, agent submissions process? Okay. Actually, one thing we didn't touch on at all, for people who are totally coming from left field, perhaps.
Yeah.
Do you get direct non-agented queries? Like, do you even entertain that? Does that still happen?
Yes and no. I don't really get, I don't get really that many direct things straight from authors, mostly because, again, there's sort of there's a lot of gatekeeping that going on, and they probably couldn't find me if they wanted. And so not often, but I do. I do get unagented proposals, and I have acquired unagented manuscripts. So one unagented manuscript actually that I acquired for HarperCollins right after I joined the company is coming out next, actually in September, and it's my favorite. I should say, I can't say that it's not my favorite. I mean, all my books are my favorites, but it's one of my favorites for this fall.
Fascinating.
It's called What Storm, What Thunder by Miriam Chansey. And it's about the earthquake in Haiti that happened in 2010. And there's an excerpt in Harper's Magazine this month. And she still is unagented, but she came to me while I was a freelance editor. I don't even really know how she sort of found her way to me. Someone recommended me to her, and she didn't have an agent, but she wanted an agent. She had a manuscript, and she knew it still needed some work. And so I worked with her on it. And then she still didn't have an agent, and I joined HarperCollins. It just was a serendipitous kind of thing. And I couldn't stop thinking about the manuscript because it was so good. It was just so good. So, I mean, she went off, and I thought she was going to, send it to some agents, and that it would be picked up like really quickly. But some other things happened in her life. And anyway, I just ended up contacting her a couple months later saying, what's going on with your manuscript? Like, what happened with that? And she was just like, oh yeah, I have it here. I haven't gotten an agent yet. And I'm like, can I see it again? I want to bring it in-house for consideration. Yeah. And she wasn't sure because she thought maybe she should wait to get an agent. And it's not always necessary. And so I brought it in-house, and people read it and went, this is stunning. And I'm just like,
yeah. And so will she get an agent eventually? Like, do you feel like that's
she may or she may not. I mean, she probably will. I think most authors at some point need an agent. It becomes very complicated. Again, you have contracts, and you have rights sales to other countries. And it's that whole business side of things that authors aren't familiar with, or have no interest in, or they want to be an author. They don't want to have to deal with all this business side of things. So an agent is really good for handling your business. So I'm sure she'll get an agent at some point. But that's just an example of me sort of working on a project or knowing an author and picking up a new project. And that's happened with other things before. So sometimes I will get a recommendation. Actually, this is another good example. I just acquired a book unagented a couple months ago, and it was a recommendation. It came from someone, an acquaintance, not someone I knew very well, but an acquaintance that sort of came through, and this person said, do you want to read this? And you're always like, I don't know. Sure. I didn't have really great high expectations before it. And so, but I read it, and I was just like, oh, this is surprisingly good. I wasn't expecting this. And they actually were very good. They only sent me 20 pages. They sort of said, I don't want to waste your time. This is like a friend of a friend. And, and I was just like, again, there's lots of friends of friends, or, people are like, but my grandmother's written a novel. Yeah. Just like, yeah, I don't know. So I was a bit skeptical, but anyway, so I read 20 pages. I went, this is something, there's something here. I mean, whether a person can sustain that for a whole novel is another thing. I mean, I do tell authors that I find as an editor, authors can usually execute a pretty good, a lot of the time, especially if they're workshopping things or taking classes, like a really good solid 100 pages. And then the book falls off a cliff, I love that. It's hard to sustain a storyline and a narrative and characters and all the narrative threads. And it's very difficult to do. It's hard to write a novel. It's hard to write any kind of book, really. So sustaining that all the way through is really difficult. And I always, I get to page 100, and I'm always like, okay,
oh my God, that's amazing.
Can it be sustained? And sometimes it can, and sometimes it can't. But sometimes, you're really surprised that I just noticed that that's sort of a little.
So will you, in that instance, will this person get like a premature acquisition, or you'll just be like, send it to me when you're done kind of situation?
So I asked for 20 pages. I like the 20 pages. They only sent me 20 pages because they didn't want to bug me with like.
Okay, got you.
They were just like, just here's a little taste. If you think that there's something here, I'll get you the full manuscript. And I hadn't had any contact with the author. This person was working as an intermediary.
Yeah.
And I was just like, okay. I said, yeah, send me the rest of the manuscript. Like this 20 pages is really good. But again, I was still skeptical that they would be able to maintain it. And but I read the rest of it and it came in and I was just like, oh my God, this is like really, really good. And the author turned out to only be 21 years old. And I was just like,
give me a break. Don't tell me those stories.
I know. And I was like, is that possible? So I acquired it. So yeah, taking recommendations from other people is a way that sometimes projects come to me, or sometimes it's someone I met or an author maybe that I've worked with in the past, or for some reason I'm familiar with their work, or I've seen maybe if they work as a journalist or they've had short stories out, like I have a sense of who they are or have seen some of their writing. There are times where people, I do a lot of guest lectures and panels and things like that in publishing. And so sometimes someone will cross my path and they'll send me something and it'll be like, oh, this is really good. So
I was having with some, would-be authors, and I mean, I told them this, but I'm like, don't take it to the bank. I'm not 100% sure, but this, the book still has to be written before any kind of acquisition thing is going to happen, right? Like you guys aren't going to buy it on a pitch in first 20 pages or anything like that. Like that doesn't work anymore.
Again, smaller indie publishing houses can sometimes do that. Like, I think when I bought Zoe Whittle's The Best Kind of People, I think she had about 100 pages done, maybe 150. So it wasn't, I mean, okay.
She had her other big books.
She had other books out, right? So again, I knew she could write. I knew that she could execute on the next project. So maybe that's a bit easier. But so maybe that's not a good example. So
no, that's still good to know that
a first time writer, like you need to see a full manuscript, because again, like that falling off a cliff after 100 pages, you need to know that the writer can write. You need to know that they can write a novel. Because again, as an editor, this isn't a writing workshop, right? It's not a writing workshop. I'm not here to teach you how to write. Your job is to go and write and give me things, and I'll still help craft and shape that work. But you need a full manuscript. And nonfiction, less so. Most nonfiction is bought based on proposal, because nonfiction, again, is very labor intensive in terms of maybe you need to travel or maybe you need to do research. And an author is not going to go through all that without an advance. So in that way, nonfiction is different. A lot of nonfiction is bought based on proposal, but fiction itself, no, you need the whole thing has to be there. And even if, like, let's say you it's the whole thing and maybe the ending still doesn't work, or there are some shortcomings, an agent especially will say, hey, this is it's really great. We know that there's probably a problem still here at the end, or we need a better ending here, but we're hoping that you see the rest of this book and why it's so good. So sometimes, you will still buy, everything you buy still needs work. It's just a matter of how much work does it need?
Yeah. To that point, I know as a writer, it's just so hard to be, I think there's just a point where you're just personally, I've done everything I can. There's nothing more I can offer this text. But I mean, what is your advice for writers as far as when to send it out, or when to know your manuscript is ready, or when it is, it has a chance with editors?
I mean, that's tough. I mean, it's tough. I mean, it's hard to, I understand that it's hard to figure that out yourself, because you're in it. You don't have any objectivity whatsoever. It's all subjective at that point. So, I mean, I would say probably that's when you send it out and have agents look at it. You have, if you've already had feedback from, let's say, maybe fellow writers, I would say friends and family reading a manuscript, that's not going to give you any valuable feedback, because they're going to say everything you write is great, right? They're just going to want to compliment you. You need someone who's actually going to, and you don't want someone who's going to criticize your book completely either. That's not really helpful, but you need to find someone that you trust and that you go, do you feel like this is pretty much together? Like, do I have everything here? And again, it's not going to be, maybe not going to be perfect. I mean, and that's also, again, where an agent comes in. An agent will know if you're close. An agent will say, yeah, you're close. Or an agent will say, no, you need to revise this a little bit more before I send it back out, or I send it out for the first time too, for consideration. That's why agents are also valuable, because they'll give you that kind of feedback. They're both encouraging, but they're critical. And that's what you need. You need someone who's going to give you both sides and give you an honest answer. I think sometimes other writers can be really super critical, right? I mean, probably more so than they need to be. So I wouldn't always trust them. And again, friends and family will say everything you write is great. So that in that way, it's not going to be very productive and helpful. But an agent sort of, will give you both sides of those things and will give you a really balanced overview.
How do you feel about freelance editors?
I did that when I was freelancing. I had a lot of agents come to me because they knew, I guess they knew I knew fiction and I could edit fiction. I think that they can be very valuable. I think the thing is if the agent is asking you to work with a professional editor, it's because they see the potential in your work and it needs to be taken to another level. Because again, agents aren't editors, although a lot of them used to work as editors, or sometimes agents become editors, but generally they're not editors. And the good agents know that they're not editors. And so if they're asking you to go work with a professional editor, it's because they see the potential. And there's, the agent wants you to succeed as well, because if you succeed, the agent succeeds. The agent only gets paid if your book sells. So there's something in it for them. So if they're telling you to go work with someone, I mean, I think that's a very positive thing. I mean, it's too bad. I mean, in some ways that the author is responsible for that cost, right? And so I think that's the downside to it. But there's also a huge upside, because if the freelance editor makes your book better, and then that book ends up selling, you're going to recoup that cost back, times 10, times 20, times 100, depending on what your advance is, right? So there is something there. And if they're telling you to work with someone, it's because they see something there and they're just trying to get it to that next level, to that sale.
Awesome. Janice, I could chat all day.
We'll have to come back.
But I think I've taken enough of your time today. Thank you so much for being on the show and sharing so generously with all the listeners. And just really appreciate you coming on and giving us a glimpse behind the Wizard's curtain. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I hope your listeners have found this valuable, and thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening, you guys, and stay tuned for more Passion Project. We will see you soon.